Chronicles, Fiction, The Apostle of Insanity Trilogy, Volume 2, Frenzy, by John Allen Price. Chapter 7.
Captain, you're needed at headquarters, said one of the figures standing over the bed. Captain, emergency briefing.
Pam, watch it, incoming, Hunter blurted out, briefly thrashing around in his bed. Then the Martian battlefield evaporated in front of him, and his private quarters returned. In place of the friends fighting for survival, he now saw two officers looming over him.
Judy, what gives now? Can't you guys let me have a full night's sleep? Sorry, Captain. This isn't security. It's Major Charles Tower, Capital Intelligence Service.
Yeah, Major. Now I recognize you. Hunter rubbed his eyes and shielded them from the room's harsh glare.
What's going on? Why is a briefing being held at this hour?
Your questions will be answered at the briefing, said Tower, already growing impatient. Not now. Get one of your best uniforms on. We will be waiting for you outside. Unlike the previous night's rousing, Hunter did not have to get dressed in front of those who awakened him. He grabbed one of his formal uniforms and had the time to get properly dressed. Major Tower and his subordinate led Hunter to a command staff car in place of a security vehicle and drove him a short distance across the base to its operations center.
Wait a minute. I thought this was to be a briefing,
said Hunter, upon entering a familiar room and confronting a familiar group of officials.
Not a repeat performance of my squad's interrogation. I can assure you, Captain, that it's not,
Rebecca Varden answered.
A critical situation has developed, and your unit is the best and only to answer it. Please, have a seat.
Rebecca motioned toward the same table where Hunter and his squad had been grilled less than 2 days before. This time, the lighting over it was softer, though it still did not fill the room. And as before, while most of the officials took seats around the table, there was one who preferred to remain cloaked in the shadows.
We know you've been asking questions about the VIP Bauhaus kidnapped from here,
said General Richard Cyrus, sitting at the head of the table.
So for that and other reasons, we felt it appropriate to call you in. Do you recognize this place?
On the wall screen behind Cyrus, a small base cut from the heart of the jungle appeared. From the jungle's lush foliage, Hunter concluded it was at least on Venus. Mars scarcely had anything that could be called jungle, and Luna had no forests whatsoever. Not until he took a closer look at the helicopters on the base's airfield could he identify who owned it.
Those are Long Riders and Python 100s, said Hunter. This is a Bauhaus base. Very good, Captain, Cyrus added. Perhaps this machine will be more familiar to you.
A magnification grid appeared on the screen and focused down on one of the Pythons. When it stopped flashing, the area outlined by the grid was blown up until it filled the screen. The slim, angular gunship in the center was fuzzy until a digital enhancing bar wiped over the image. Then it became sharp enough for Hunter to recognize some of its markings and all of its battle damage.
Good Lord, I think that's the Python we had the duel with,
said Hunter, the shock evident in his voice.
Lieutenant Alvarez would probably be more definite.
It is, and we'll bring her in later, said Tower, sitting next to General Cyrus. In front of him were a series of folders and data disks, with emblems of the Strategic Reconnaissance Office. This is Base Aquila, Base Eagle. It was originally a science research station, and believe me, only an Eagle can reach it. There's no way into it by land. It's so remote, you can only reach it by air, and we believe this is where the VIP is being held. We've accounted for virtually every surviving helicopter from the raid, and have concluded they made no stops anywhere else. In addition to the magnified image of the Bauhaus gunship, a series of inserts were added to the screen. They showed the jungle base in various infrared and radar imaging views. Finally, everything was wiped from the screen and replaced with a tactical map showing the base's location inside Bauhaus territory, together with a line snaking from a capital forward base into Imperial territory before looping back on Aquila.
Are you certain she's still there? Hunter asked. And not at some base in Heimberg?
There's been no air traffic into Aquila or out of it since the arrival of the raiding party, said Tower. And our agents in Heimberg report no activity that would coincide with the arrival of our VIP.
From the looks of this map, you're going to repeat our operation against Cybertronic, except you're staging the diversion near the start of it instead of at the end. When will it be launched?
Later today, Cyrus answered. A fast response is essential, which is one of the reasons why we brought you in. Your unit is the only Special Forces independent action squad that hasn't suffered any recent casualties. You're at full strength and can be deployed in a matter of hours.
General, there are other such squads available,
said Hart, speaking up after a prolonged period of agitated silence.
And we can have one of them flown here in a matter of hours. What? Bring someone in from halfway around the planet?
Asked Rebecca, giving Hart a sharp look.
And expect them to go into action immediately? On top of that, none of the other units have the extensive experience operating from the local districts. No, you're creating a scenario for disaster. And you're rewarding Captain Hunter's insubordination. Charges should still be laid against him for what happened to my advisor, and I would like his subsequent activities investigated as well.
Sorry, Mr. Hart, but the gravity of the situation overrules disciplinary concerns. The deep, familiar voice ended the argument between Varden and Hart before it really started. Everyone turned to the man in the shadows, who was now standing so close to the table that he grazed the field of light circling it. The details of his suit were visible, however, his face was not. The funeral service you organized for the Bauhaus dead was commendable, Wood added. It shows you have respect for the enemy, Captain. This is good. It's something soldiers once did.
Thank you, sir, said Hunter. How much time do we have before this operation is launched?
Approximately 8 hours. We'd like you to get into the drop point by early afternoon. The storms that move continually through the target area should provide you with excellent cover.
Good. Will the ops briefing start now?
No, this has merely been a preliminary one, said Wood. You appear to be eager to join it, though if you wish to withdraw, you may do so now.
No, I can promise my entire squad will want to be part of this, Hunter responded. I'd just like to have my officers with me for the ops briefing.
Then collect them. Lieutenant, take Captain Hart back to his quarters. Tower's adjunct officer led Hunter from the conference room, and the moment they disappeared through the main doors, Wood finished emerging from the shadows. He took Hunter's seat at the table, one directly across from Calvin Hart. General, have you had any problems coordinating the operation with District Landis? Wood continued.
Only in the requisition of fuel stocks for the decoy ops, said Cyrus. They'll just have to restrict some of the training flights. How have negotiations with Imperial fared?
They owe us for warning them about the Cybertronic assassination earlier this year. They'll allow 1 helicopter and 1 transport tanker to cross their border unchallenged. It wasn't even necessary to mention the Dark Legion.
A mission like this is so sensitive,
Hart interjected.
I dread to think how a unit as undisciplined as Captain Hunter's may ruin it.
If this were a diplomatic mission, you'd be right, said Wood, growing irritated. But it's not. It's a very dangerous rescue, and we need the best Special Forces unit available. Be grateful for the 1 concession I did give you. If any diplomatic problems arise, your advisor team should handle them. Greetings, Timothy. Peace be with you, said the middle-aged black man, wearing the robes of a Brotherhood mystic. Congratulations on again selecting another appropriate meeting place. After making this announcement, Pontius slid into the restaurant booth Tim Small had reserved and found his lunch already waiting for him. The crock of soup was still hot to the touch, as was the round loaf of wheat bread in the middle of the table. Small had already taken a wedge from the loaf and was dipping it into his own soup. A large carafe of iced tea also sat on the table, and it was this Pontius first helped himself to. I always wondered how hot you mystics got, walking around in robes like that, Small said after standing up to greet his contact man. Sometimes it's very hot, Pontius answered after drinking down nearly half the glass he had just poured. But not so much as I can't enjoy your offering of seafood and vegetable soup. I see yours is beef. At least it's what they call beef around here. It does taste somewhat like it. You never stray far from hamburger, do you? So, my friend, what's this report you're so eager for me to view? Small slid a folder out of his attaché case and up onto the table, so quietly it almost appeared like magic to Pontius. In between slicing off a piece of bread and buttering it, he opened the folder and began reading the report as he ate. He had not gone far into the printouts and handwritten notes before he stopped eating, when the bread he'd been holding fell into his soup. Small knew he had something the Brotherhood was greatly interested in. We've heard of this woman, Pontius said in a hushed voice. She was the object of a Mishima covert operation on Luna. We've heard she's been a prisoner of the Dark Legion, and that the Mishima operation did rescue her. But the ending was confused. We believed Mishima still had her on Luna. We put no faith in the reports she had returned here. In our arrogance, we were foolish. You mean Capital never told you they had her? Small asked, keeping his voice just above a whisper, in spite of the restaurant's noise from its other guests. We heard Capital had something which would help us in our struggle against the Dark Legion. We never heard it was someone, most particularly this woman. Well, Bauhaus has her now. Maybe your people in Heimberg can find out where she is. Indeed. We'll also warn them that the possession of this woman risks an attack by the Dark Legion, said Pontius as he resumed eating his meal. That's weird. MItch pretty much said the same thing when he saw this report, Small said, remembering. You mean your friend, the war hero? Again, Pontius stopped eating, and this time the look on his face was not of shock, but mild surprise.
Captain Hunter is concerned an adversary may be attacked by the Dark Legion. This isn't weird, Timothy. It's good. Funny you should mention that. One of the reasons I asked for this meeting is to see if Bauhaus can't be worn. The other reason is Hunter wants to know more about the Dark Legion. He'd like for you to meet with him and his squad. As to the first, I'll see what can be done through our directorates. For the second, the captain can view our broadcasts and learn much from them. Those are generalized for the average citizen to understand, said Small. And they're designed to frighten. MItch and his crew are professional soldiers. They're not interested in being scared by a spook show. They want to know the facts. The facts, Pontius repeated in between spoonfuls of soup. The facts, Timothy, are more frightening than any spook show could possibly be. We wish to warn humanity of the growing threat, not strike them with mortal fear. Though it's against our rules to discuss such secrets with outsiders, I agree to meet with your friends. I hope indeed they are professional soldiers. They'll need to call upon such professionalism when the threat's true nature is revealed. Thank you, Pontius. I'll contact them when I can, and I'll arrange the meeting. When will that be? I honestly can't tell you, Small admitted. I tried Mitch's private line before coming here, but all I got was a pre-recorded message saying he was unavailable. I got the same message from the other squad members, which means only one thing: they're on an operation. I only hope they'll survive it.
Dave and I are done with our weapons and equipment checks, Lieutenant, said Halston. If you need any help, we'd be glad to give you a hand.
Good. We got touch-up work that needs done fast,
said Alvarez.
Use these to spray over the yellow sections of the camouflage.
Alvarez handed the squad's fire support specialist and his assistant several large aerosol cans, then led them over to her cutlass and indicated some of the areas on its surface she wanted covered with new paint.
How come, Lieutenant?
Redfield asked, puzzled.
Your ship just got touched up a couple of weeks ago.
This here's a jungle operation, not desert ops, said Halston, responding first. And yellow don't mix too well with the jungle.
Just make sure you don't overspray any of the armor glass,
Alvarez added.
And don't touch the areas you've sprayed, otherwise they won't dry evenly. Now get to work, and don't try to be flitter artists.
Of the several Cutlass and Grendel helicopters sitting in the Special Forces hangar, only the one assigned to Hunter's squad was receiving any major attention. The fuel and ordnance crews had just finished loading its internal and external tanks and arming it with belts of cannon shells, rocket pods, and Sidewinder CX missiles. Unlike most weapon loading procedures, which required the aircraft to taxi to an open-air service point, this would allow the CFAH-3 to depart as soon as it left the hangar. All it needed now to become operational was its crew and their personal equipment.
Squad, attention!
Alvarez barked when she noticed a sizable entourage of officers and civilians entering the hangar. Work on her gunship and the tables of infantry weapons beside it came to an abrupt halt. Loose cartridges were still rolling around and clinking against each other when the entourage arrived.
Colonel Varden, I believe you already know my officers and men,
said Hunter, turning to the highest-ranked officer in the group.
Yes, they're becoming the best-known unit in my command,
said Rebecca, who in turn introduced the squad members to the Army and Air Force officers accompanying her.
You could also call them the most notorious in the Special Forces, Hart added, just as the round of introductions was ending. Thanks, Calvin. You really know how to throw cold water on something, said Hunter. Yes, Mr. Hunter, we conceded on one of your more important requests, said Rebecca. You should be grateful higher authority didn't reject everything you put forward. What request is this, Colonel? Said Vanetti, hesitantly and suspiciously. A military advisor team will accompany you on this mission. I know it's unusual for such a deep penetration raid, but this is an unusual mission to begin with. Who's it gonna be, Colonel? Before Vanetti's next question could be answered, a crash of plastic storage containers caught everyone's attention. The hard clacking seemed to spread across the back of the hangar before it ended, by which time Sutter and Bamble had finally appeared. Dirk, Lynn, it's good to see you again, said Lieutenant Rogers, looking up from his backpack of communications gear. Raymond, I should have guessed you'd be the only one who'd be happy to see them, Alvarez observed sarcastically. I'm sorry, we didn't get to your office in time, Mr. Hart, Bamble apologized. But as I told you on the car phone, we got lost. That figures, said Hunter, the tone in his voice matching Alvarez's attitude. And I suppose, in all the rushing around, neither of you had the time to go over the mission plan? That one of us is going to have to waste our time briefing you? Following our takeoff from Roswell, we're to cross into District Landis at low altitude, said Sutter after she scanned the hangar and made sure the only people in it were either high-ranking officers or Special Forces personnel. We'll maintain minimum altitude as we cross the Imperial frontier and until we rendezvous with our tanker. Once we've refueled, we'll slip across the Bauhaus frontier while the Air Force stages more large-scale maneuvers just inside our airspace. It's nice to see someone's done their homework, Hunter responded, impressed. All right. Get out of those suits and into some jungle fatigues. If your partner has to be briefed, Lynn, you do it. We synchronize our chronometers in 30 minutes. Julia, conduct your tour of the Cutlass later. What gives? Haven't you guys ever seen a real gunship before? After shooing the Air Force officers out of their helicopter, Hunter's squad began loading their weapons and munitions and other equipment into it. Half an hour later, they paused briefly to set their watches and the mission event timer in the cockpit. Once the squad and their advisors boarded it, the Cutlass was finally towed out of the hangar. Its auxiliary power unit was whirring loudly by the time the tractor had finished pulling it out to a spot on the apron marked for helicopter launches. Alvarez waited until the ground crew had just cleared the area around it before firing up the main engines and engaging the rotors. Buzzing furiously, the CFAH-3 lifted off the trolley used to move it around and headed across the airport. Alvarez did not use any of its runways or taxiways to make her departure, nor did she enter its sparsely populated traffic pattern. She never contacted its control tower or acknowledged any instruction. Officially, the sortie did not exist. The Cutlass retracted its landing skids and darted away from the field on a southwesterly course. Behind it, standing in front of the Air Force hangars and filling the arming service points, were most of the FA-99 fighters based at Roswell. Already a supporting force of Hercules 4 cargo tankers were marshalling on the taxiways. By the time they were disappearing over the horizon, the fighters would be assembling in a massed formation over the field. Mutant Chronicles, Fiction, The Apostle of Insanity Trilogy, Volume 2, Frenzy, by John Allen Price. Chapter 7. End.